everybody. This 4th of July when I was driving home, I was listening to the radio and they had a ton of band music on there, and I realized how much I missed band music, and I got to thinking about what band pieces I want to listen to, and then there were so many that I had to make a list. So I'm going to do what so many of us band people do. In today's video, we're going to talk about my 10 most influential and favorite works for the wind band. Of course, as always, please subscribe, please like the video, and if you think that I left a piece off of the list, you should comment below about what your 10 favorite pieces for band are. Or if you think that one of these pieces is garbage and you want to know why I put it on the list, you should tell me too. Like, I'm ready to debate it out on the comment section. In order to keep things simple, I have 3 criteria to make my list. The first of the 3 criteria is that the piece must be for winds and percussion, no orchestra, and it must be originally composed for winds and percussion. No transcriptions, no arrangements, no versions, just an original composition for band. The second one is that it must be artistically valuable. Now I could spend a whole video talking about what that means. To me, that means that it has a clear and concise form, it still sounds fresh, and it doesn't exist purely for historical purposes. It's still relevant in today's world of wind band. And the third criteria is that if this piece was being played at some sort of convention, I would bail on my friends to go watch the concert live. So, must be originally for band, must be artistically valuable, and I would bail on my friends to go see it live. Number 10, The Frozen Cathedral by John Mackey. Instantly, when this piece opens, you can tell that it's a John Mackey piece. There's percussion all over the place, it's big, it's epic, it uses extended instrumentation, it uses all sorts of instruments from the flute family, and it is a massive piece. I was able to see this piece live at the Meyerson, and it was epic, needless to say. Interestingly enough, this piece was written in 2013, and it is by far the most recent piece on my list. But this piece is epic, awesome, and amazing, and I love getting to hear this live whenever I can. Number 9, Terpsichore by Bob Margolis. I first heard this piece when I was an undergrad in North Texas, and one of the things that really caught my attention about this piece was that every single section gets a moment, or a solo, or a feature. This piece takes Renaissance stances from several hundred years ago and sets them to today's modern wind band in a way that I think is fresh and exciting from really beginning to end. And one of the things that I remember about this piece is that at the very end, the melody was super exciting, and I was walking out of the concert hall singing the finale, singing that last melody. I don't know if Terpsichore makes many people's top 10, but for me, it was one of those pieces that really got me into wind band when I was an undergrad. Number 8, Symphonies of Wind Instruments by Igor Stravinsky. I first encountered this piece as I was looking through chamber music, chamber wind music specifically. In fact, chamber music is a whole subgenre of the wind band that I didn't even know existed until after I finished my undergraduate degree. I went to a conducting clinic and I asked the clinician what his top 10 pieces for band were. He said he wasn't sure off the top of his head, but he knew that there would be a ton of chamber music in there. This was one of the pieces that he recommended that I listen to. This piece was written in 1920, 100 years ago. This piece is incredibly fresh. It sounds modern. It sounds like it could have been written yesterday. In fact, when I was first looking around to find a recording of this piece, I found a recording, and it sounded so modern and so new that I had to find another recording to double check that it was the right piece. For the piece being 100 years old, it's still able to sound super fresh, super relevant today, and even now when I listen to it, I still find it incredibly interesting, and it keeps my attention the entire way through. Number 7, the Dvorak Serenade for Winds in D minor. Now, I know that I said that I wouldn't put pieces on this list that were historically relevant or historically important, but I find that this is the exception to the rule. This piece happens to use the traditional harmony music instrumentation, which is certainly old and dated, and we definitely don't use that anymore. But I find the music itself incredibly interesting, even if it does sound dated. A lot of people don't realize that the big name composers like Stravinsky and Dvorak wrote for winds. In fact, the wind medium has all sorts of composers that have written for it. Dvorak, Stravinsky, Mozart, Beethoven, going all the way back as far as our classical Western music tradition. My favorite part of the piece, even now, is at the very end when the opening theme comes back for the final recap in the last movement. So this piece definitely in my top 10 and definitely worthy of being the exception to the rules. Number 6, George Washington Bridge by William Schumann. Now, I am slightly biased because my last name is Schumann, even though it's spelled differently, and my middle name is William, so I'm slightly biased. But even so, I love the sound of a big symphonic band from this 1950s polytonal kind of William Schumann, Persichetti sound, this time frame. One of the interesting things about this time was that band directors were trying to get big name composers to write for winds again. There was this perception that bands were for parades or military occasions or for children, and so the professional band people, the military band people, the academics, they wanted to start commissioning these big name composers. William Schumann was one of the big names in composition. He had won the very first Pulitzer Prize for Music in 1943, so this kind of comes out of the idea of getting big name composers to write for band. Fun fact, this piece was premiered at Interlaken, and I spent a summer there, so another reason why I'm slightly biased towards this piece. Independent of the namesake and the reason why it was composed and where it premiered, this piece is big, and it is epic, and it uses really interesting polytonal techniques that challenged my young ears during my first 4 years of undergrad at North Texas. In fact, I hated this piece the first time I heard it through, and it took a couple of years of listening to it over and over and over again before I realized how super interesting this piece was. Number 5, Music for Prague, 1968. KAREL HUSA is another one of the big names that the wind band was super fortunate to recruit into writing for wind band, and he's also one of the composers that ended up really enjoying writing for wind band. In fact, Music for Prague is one of the few pieces that, back in those times, was written originally for band and then transcribed over to orchestra. Usually it was the other way around. I find that students of all ages, whether it's middle school or high school, seem to understand and appreciate the seriousness of this piece, and I find that this piece still, even now, keeps me interested and engaged from beginning all the way to the end. Number 4, Symphony in B-flat by Paul Hindemith. Again, we see another piece from the 50s with a big name composer that was brought into the world of winds. From the very first note, this piece is intense. It's incredibly serious, it's incredibly big. There's energy all the way from beginning to the end. What I like about this piece is that every time I listen to it, every time I look at the score, I find something new. Whether I'm listening to it at a concert, or whether I was studying it in grad school when one of the concert bands was doing it. Number 3, A Child's Garden of Dreams by David Maslanka. Now I know that most people are going to put Symphony number 4 on their list if they're going to include any Maslanka piece. But for me, this piece is so intriguing. This piece is, again, interesting every time that I listen to it. The piece is about these dreams that were had by this 10-year-old girl. And she wrote them in a journal and she gave them to her dad, who was a psychiatrist. And her dad went to go talk to another psychiatrist, a very famous one named Carl Jung, and he took these and included these journal entries into one of his books. And these journal entries are really, really, really descriptive. In fact, the name of each one of these movements in A Child's Garden of Dreams is incredibly long and very descriptive. For example, the third movement is called, this is the name of the third movement, A horde of small animals frightens the dreamer. The animals increase to a tremendous size, and one of them devours the little girl. So like all of the movements have incredibly long names and they're incredibly vivid like that. I saw this my first semester when I was at UNT, and it was the very first time that I got sucked into a piece. I couldn't stop reading the program notes and imagining what was going on as the band was playing it. For me, it was one of my first real-life, programmatic, intense musical moments. And even now, when I listen to the piece, specifically the Dallas Winds recording, I get lost in the middle of the second and third and fourth movements, and they all kind of weave in and out. The images are so intense. If you haven't listened to this piece, you should stop what you're doing right now. Get on Spotify and go listen to the Dallas Winds recording of this. It is incredible. And then try to read all the names. Find some program notes too. This piece is so in-depth, there's so much to it. Man, this piece is awesome. Yeah, I love this piece. So that's number 3. Number 2, Lincolnshire Posy by Percy Grainger. Of course, this piece is probably on literally everybody's list, and if it's not, you're probably not a true band nerd. Most everybody knows that it's a piece of folk songs that Grainger collected when he was walking across England. What I always find interesting about it is that it's a piece made up of English folk songs, but it was commissioned by Americans, premiered by Americans, and written by an Australian, which it's the beauty of music, I suppose, right? Also, an interesting fact about this, it was premiered by a band that was made up of people from local breweries, and they used to like host bands, kind of like, you know, like now you'll have like a company softball team. Well, back in the day, you used to have like a company band, and one of the companies that had musicians in this premiere was Pabst Blue Ribbon, like PBR, like the beer company. They premiered Lincolnshire Posy. Also, worth noting, in my opinion, the best recording of this piece isn't actually a concert or a professional recording of the piece. There's a video on YouTube of Fred Fennell rehearsing for like an hour, all of Lincolnshire Posy, every single movement, with the Navy band. And I watched that hour-long video probably once a semester just to learn and just to sit and be in awe of how awesome Fred Fennell is and how much music he can pull out of Lincolnshire Posy. I would be shocked if somebody didn't have Lincolnshire Posy on their list. And number one. Anybody that knows me knows that my number one favorite all-time piece for band is the Persichetti Divertimento. Persichetti, the thing with him is that all of his music is very simple. It's either a song or a dance. But what I like about this piece is that even though it's either A or B, each movement is unique, has its own identity. It keeps me interested. It's unique. Persichetti, of course, used polytonality, which is one of my favorite techniques. I'm drawn to that sound. I like the complexity of it. But I also like the simplicity of the melodies that he uses in the complexity of polytonality. I remember hating this piece the first time I heard it. I didn't understand it, I didn't get it. I really didn't enjoy it at all the concert that I had to watch this for the first time. I have no idea when I decided that I liked this piece, but at some point after my undergraduate degree, I was just listening to Persichetti and I really got sucked into the Divertimento. And I love seeing it live, I love getting to work on it when I go to conducting workshops, I love watching other high school groups try to do it. I think it's a great piece for high school band, I think it's an interesting piece for university band. I personally love listening to that piece. To me, it is without a doubt the quintessential piece for wind band. Well, there you have it. My 10 most favorite pieces for wind band. As always, thanks for watching.